All right, and it looks like while Mark's getting set up, I'll give a quick introduction. So we're transitioning now to one of our eco track sessions, and we're going to learn about increasing event attendance through targeted advertising. So we'll be hearing from Mark Dostal, who currently works as King Conservation District's engagement manager, and he's spent the last 7 years working in environmental and conservation outreach and communications, and is excited to grow and expand KCD's engagement program. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Can you hear me?
Yes. Your screen is frozen.
Everyone for your patience while I get this set up. GoToWebinar is not something I'm super familiar with, so it's going to take me just a second.
There it is. Perfect, Mark.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining us for this presentation on increasing event attendance through targeted advertising. I'm going to start off by saying that many of you are already doing really great work with events and attendance and utilizing social media and targeted advertising. So there are potentially people on this call that actually know significantly more than I do. But I tried to distill down some of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years as Nikki and I have worked really hand in hand to try to improve event attendance for KCD events. I am, again, still learning GoToWebinar, so I was gonna see if people entered chat, do I get to see that chat?
No, but I'll read it to you, no problem.
Okay, perfect. So while I'm presenting, I'm gonna go through my slides for the first little bit. I'm gonna hopefully have time to then do a quick run through for those that are less familiar with digital advertising. And I'm gonna say digital advertising, but just to be frank, I'm really talking about Facebook and Instagram, which are really still like the gold stars of digital advertising for most of our purposes driving event attendance. And then some Q&A after that. But really at any point during this presentation, if you've got a question, if you've got something you want to add, feel free to enter it into the chat. And for the moderators, feel free to interrupt me at will. I know that I get bored of the sound of my own voice, so interruptions are encouraged as you're seeing things in this that pop out to you. So the first thing I was curious, you can enter this in the chat. I can't see this, the moderator can, but I am curious of the people here, how many people have experience using Facebook for targeted advertising, so paid for advertising? And for the moderator, if people are entering this into the chat, just giving me a sense of like yays or nays, yeses or nos, just because I know I kind of jump into this and realize that I'm skirting a sort of middle, a moderate level of, I'm assuming a moderate level of familiarity with the Facebook platform.
Yeah, how about this, folks? Why don't you raise your hand if you have, as a way to answer Mark, I can get a quick response back to him. So how many folks are familiar with what he was saying? Probably only maybe of folks who are actually responding, probably about a third of your audience.
Okay, that's great. I just, I'm never sure what people's comfort and familiarity is with the topics, so that's really good to know. So thank you all, and we'll hop into it. What if you hold an event and nobody comes? We've all seen this. You plan out a great event, but as the weeks and days get closer, you just aren't seeing the signups you'd expected. Planning workshops and events are time-consuming and resource-heavy, and having a low turnout is just a missed opportunity. We all want high attendance, new people, and the right people. And I'm hopefully going to lay out today that targeted advertising is a good way of achieving all three of those things. Getting a good attendance, reaching new audiences, and hopefully getting the right people to your workshops. So KCD does a pretty all of the above version of outreach around event attendance. This slide is going to show these pie charts that show some where people said that they heard about our event from some of our recent events. On the left, we have a Beautify event, which is an urban shorelines event. Managing wildfire risk is pretty self-explanatory. And then the 3 pie charts on the right are our Where the Water Begins workshops, which are marine shoreline landowner workshops. If you look at the pie charts, you can see that gray is social media, blue is our KCD newsletter, which I'm always very impressed how many people actually read our newsletter, and really we do get quite a few conversions there. So I don't know what other people's experience is, but I know that we put a lot of effort into our newsletter, and it does seem to pay off quite a bit for us. Orange is other. I imagine for a lot of those people, they are saying other because they heard about the event somewhere, but they just can't quite remember where. And then yellow is word of mouth. And so looking at these charts, you can see that for KCD, social media is one of the bigger drivers of our event attendance. And some of this is going to be because we've made a focus on doing social media outreach, because we've paid for advertising, but some of it's also just a reflection of how people get to events in general. And a lot of people schedule their social activities based on what they're seeing and engaging with on social media. The 3 Where the Water Begins events on the right, you can see that lighter blue segment of the pie, and that's from a direct postcard mailer. So we still do, for some of our events, direct mailers, and those you can see really do also drive attendance and event signups. For this presentation, again, I'm going to be focusing on digital targeted advertising. One of the reasons not being that direct mailers don't work, but one of the reasons being that, as we'll see, digital advertising can be significantly less expensive. But one of the things we've also actually seen at KCD is we were trying to determine whether to replace our direct mailers for the events we do those with social media. And we actually think that we're seeing a number of people who attend say both. I saw your postcard in my mailbox, and then I was delivered a Facebook ad, within that same week on my laptop. And it was really easy to click through, get to the event, and sign up. So, sorry, there was a loud crash coming from the other room. So this is just a simple breakdown of some of our events, just to kind of set the scene for why we're taking this seriously, because we are seeing the ability to drive attendance to these events. So digital advertising. In my mind, digital advertising is direct, it is quick, it is easy, and is it affordable? I imagine many of you here would disagree with at least one of those. Hopefully, again, I will convince you by the end of this that it really is approachable, even if you have lower resources, even if you don't have a marketing budget, that there are ways to make this work for you. Digital advertising is direct. You can target really specific audiences with it. As we'll talk about a little later, through Facebook, you can target people by demographics, by interests, by job, by geography. You can target people you can target your own existing audience to deliver an ad to, so people who already like and engage with your Facebook page or your website, and you can target people who are friends of the people that engage with you. So playing off of the notion that, if your audience is people that like your work, their friends might as well. That directness is great for many of the events that we're doing. We're really after very specific people that we're trying to convert into, a steward of their marine shoreline. It's a very specific audience, and I think that social media can be really good for targeting that. Social media is also quick. You can set it up and get it started, an ad on social media, almost immediately, with the caveat that Facebook does have a 12 to 24-hour delay sometimes to actually start running the ad, but setting it up is relatively quick. You can get a Facebook ad built in a matter of minutes if you feel comfortable with what you're doing. And then again, I would say that it's easy. Social media advertising can be intimidating. There is a lot there. Facebook does not always make it easy. In my experience over the last 6 or so years of buying ads through Facebook, they update their platform very frequently. So if you get used to what it looks like on the back end, 2 to 3 months later, you might be looking at a very different back end as Facebook continues to change their product. But again, and we'll go through this, there's a sort of surface level and there's a sort of deep back end to Facebook advertising. And the surface level one is there, is easy, and is effective. And then I would also say that it is affordable. I know many people, again, there's not always a marketing budget built in, but one of the great things about targeted advertising is the cost. You can reach people for pennies and you can convert people for under $1 to an actual event sign up. KCD has spent anywhere from $50 to $200 advertising a specific event. Typically the larger ones are when we really have grant money to go towards that. Less than $50 for us, we've found to be too low of an ad buy to really get people converted and get people for the ad to be delivered to enough people to get the conversions that we would want to see. But in terms of affordability, you know, I mentioned the direct mailers in the previous slide. And when you're looking at direct mailers, you know, you're often paying 50 cents-ish per postcard, let's say, and that's if you're paying 50 cents per postcard, that's 50 cents just for that postcard to reach one person. And then if you look at the actual number of conversions, so the number of people that the postcard reaches and then actually sign up for the event, you're typically paying well over $1. And in often cases, what we've found is, you know, $5 to $10 per person who signs up. With social media, again, you can deliver the ad to a person, oftentimes for a cent. And then if you look at the conversion rate, so people who saw the ad and signed up, you can actually see that the total conversion cost was, say, 50 cents per person. So there is definitely a cost to it, but it can be really an affordable way to be reaching the people that you want to get to your event. But you do need to plan, build, and budget. And so this is the difficult thing with social media in general, is that because there's this sense that it is so immediate and so quick, people often underestimate really just how much work there is involved to make your ad or your social media robust and looking good and enticing to people to really get them to want to sign up. A quickly made ad that hasn't had enough thought put into it can really fall flat. And this is something that I know I did when I first started at KCD, was I was really excited to get people to try this digital marketing out. And so I built some ads really quickly. We spent $50 and maybe got one more person to sign up. And when you're showing that to the rest of your office, that's not really a convincing pitch for people to be spending either grant money or precious programmatic dollars on marketing when, you know, your initial show is $50 and we really didn't get anything. But as we'll talk about in a little bit, there's a learning curve to doing social media and doing this targeted advertising. And one of the best things you can do is to follow these 3 bullet points. You really want to develop a plan for what you're comfortable experimenting with, for what you're comfortable. Oh, and Nikki just let me know that my camera is off. It should be on. Did it come back on?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Has it been off the whole time?
Yes, and it looks like it froze again.
Oh,
sorry.
No. Sorry.
It's okay, Mark. If we can't get it to work, we can still hear you pretty effectively and your presentation's great.
Okay, I apologize that, yeah, I don't know why it's kicking out. So I apologize for that. I will try to be as engaging as I can with my voice alone.
Now it's working great.
Okay, so again, planning, building, and budgeting. It really is important to ahead of time establish what you're going to do, what you're comfortable doing, so that you can really create a plan that says, if we haven't done this kind of marketing before, we're going to commit these amount of resources to try it out, and we're not going to get discouraged if the first attempt is not successful. You got to learn to crawl before you can walk, and this is no different. You will have some attempts that just really don't go anywhere, and you spend the money, it doesn't really reach the right people, and that is just a part of learning how your audience engages with your material and what makes for an effective ad. In terms of, and so in terms of planning, the best thing you can do is just start with the basics, and the basics are a marketing package. This is where you're planning an event, and one of the things that you should be really planning is the marketing package for that event. It's thinking through all of the marketing timeline, the photos that you're going to use, who your audience is, what the language you're going to use, and what hook you're going to get to engage with your audience. Building this out ahead of time is really important for having a successful conversion rate, as well as then having this sort of contained package that you can reflect and review. So if you do a great job with your outreach and you get a lot of people, great, this was a really good package. If you don't, you can go back and refer to this. Was there something about our photos that were not engaging? Was there something about our timeline that was off? It's really, again, easy to think of your outreach as sort of the last thing. You spend all of the time making sure the event itself is really good, and sometimes marketing comes in at the very end and doesn't get the attention that it needs to really convert people. And so in terms of the package, I would always say that the number one thing is good photos and videos. The internet is a visual medium, and good photo and video is just kind of a requirement for engaging with the internet at all. Your website, your social media, advertising, definitely. A good photo is not enough to necessarily convince everyone to join your event, but a bad photo really can be damaging to the brand of your organization and damaging to people wanting to engage with it. I know a lot of organizations are strapped for resources, and getting photo and video is not necessarily the top of your priority list, but it can be really worth it to pick a few times during the year, head out with a camera, and get really engaging photos of any of your technicians in the field, volunteers in the field. In terms of getting photos, if you Google search 10 photo tips, you will find infinite resources on just how to get a good enough photo for the purposes of advertising. The two photos on this slide are great examples of the kinds of things you're looking for in a good photo. You want something that is bright, that is welcoming, that preferably features people, and those people smiling or doing an activity. I know that we can get really comfortable sending out a lot of beautiful environments or beautiful plants without people in them, but rule of thumb for marketing is that people respond to people. And so if you want to get somebody to join the event, they're really looking for who are the people that are at the back end of this event, who is it that I'm joining? And your photos can really do a lot of that legwork. So the top right photo we've used in the past for different events that are workshops on restoration. And so you're giving somebody a visual clue that, like, this is you're going to be out restoring, planting. It's just a great photo. And the bottom right as well, we used that for a volunteer event recruitment, and you've got two wonderful looking people smiling. It's well lit. This looks like a fun environment that I would like to join. The photos do need to be relatively decent quality. But again, if you look at these two, these are not professional level shots. There could be a lot more done with, like, the cropping of the photo or this or that. These are just a decent modern camera on a cell phone. And again, just making sure that it's, like, well lit and that the photo comes out in a high resolution. And yeah, so you don't need to go crazy with it, but you do need them. They're also, if you're struggling for these resources, I know that there are a number of websites where you can get free photos, as well as as well as asking partner CDs for photos of plants, or nature shots. And I know that the Commission also has in their resource library photos for CDs to use. So it's worth taking the time to think through the events that you're going to hold in a year and what good photos you might want to have to make that sort of compelling visual. The second part of the basics is your timeline. And so, and this is really important. It takes a lot more interaction than we often think for people to finally convert to signing up for the event. I hear a lot of made up numbers thrown around, but a lot of times people say, you know, 3 to 7, somebody needs to see something 3 to 7 times before that they're convinced to take that action. On social media, if you're doing, say, organic posting, like you do a Facebook post, typically those are only being seen by about 5% of your audience. So I've definitely seen this where, and KCD, we've done this as well. We'll post an event 2 different times, and that feels to us like we posted it a lot, but really we may have only hit 10% of our audience at that point. You can post the same event quite a few more times than you would think and still not have too many people and still have new people from your audience seeing it. So for KCD, you know, the timeline that we tried, and so also for your timeline, starting early. So for KCD, we try to get events in our newsletter months in advance so that people can start to see the event, getting it up on social media about a month in advance, and really sharing it 3, 4, or more times during that period, along with if we decide to do some targeted advertising as well. And we've really found that that longer timeline and more repetition during that timeline can have a huge impact on conversion rates. The third thing for your marketing package is really thinking through your audience. It seems really obvious who your audience is, but we often don't take the time to really sit down and think through that. And being able to say clearly who your audience is again important for knowing if your outreach effort is successful or not. You can go back and review that and really see, like, did we have the right audience that matched the event we were throwing? Did we talk to them and communicate with them in the right way? And then finally, for the basics is the hook. And this is for your marketing package, it's writing out your language in advance. You know, what is the language you're going to use in your social media, in your newsletter, and writing that down in advance and thinking of a hook. For your ads, the hook is the thing that quickly engages somebody, typically like the first line, typically a one-liner, a question, an informational fact, telling somebody what they're going to get from the event. So really taking the time to think of, like, what would hook your audience, what would connect your audience quickly with, this is, you are the kind of the person that this event is for, and this is what the event is being provided. And as we go through some of my examples, I'll point out some of the hooks that we've used and whether or not I thought they were good or not. And so now we're going to jump into some of the targeting. And again, a lot of my presentation is, I apologize that my camera keeps turning on and off. I have no idea why that is. We're going to jump into this. So a lot of the screenshots are screenshots from Facebook. So again, for those of you less familiar with Facebook, I'll talk through what this is going to look like a lot on some of the slides, but I'll talk through them. But all of this are just screenshots from different parts of Facebook advertising for the targeted ads. And so on this slide, we're seeing 2 different ads that KCD ran for Discovery Farms farm tours, one last fall and one this spring. And what this slide you can see on the far right is the amount spent. So for each one, we spent $50. In the third column, you see the number of link clicks. So 10 link clicks on the first one, 62 links on the spring one. You see the reach in the second column. And reach is what Facebook calls basically the total number of deliveries. So when you're scrolling through Facebook and you see an ad and you immediately recognize it's an ad and you have no interest in it and you immediately scroll by, that's a reach. If you stop and look at the ad, that's a reach. It doesn't indicate that the person interacted at all, but it does give you a sense of, like, how many people potentially could have interacted with the ad. And so again, the ad that we delivered last fall, we got a reach of about 1,000 people saw the ad. Whereas this spring we had about 3,000 people see the ad. so, what we're seeing here is that last fall, we spent $50 to get 10 people to click through to the link. So $5 a person. This isn't even event signups. This is just to click the link. Whereas in the spring, we spent the same $50, but got 62 people to click through to the Eventbrite to take a look at our event. And there's some pretty good reasons for this. And this is something that, again, even having done this now at KCD for a while, last fall, this was a slightly different style of farm tour that we did. So we were trying to look at and identify new audiences and try out some new messaging. And you can see that I missed the mark. Like, we just clearly didn't have something in alignment to really make the most use of the money we spent, whereas the spring did a lot better. If you look at the first column under the sort of one that says ticket sales, you'll see that it says join KCD and American Farmland Trust. And on the second ad, you'll see that it says, do you manage livestock? So both of those were the hooks for these ads. So when the ad was delivered along with the photo, those were the first lines that people read. Talking about hooks and what grabs people's attention, if you're scrolling through Facebook and you're not sure that this event is for you, I would ask people to throw in the chat which hook they think is better. Do you think it's better to say join KCD and American Farmland Trust as your hook, or is it better to say do you manage livestock as your hook? And I can't see your chat, but I would love for people to throw out which one they think for a second before I confirm that 100% do you manage livestock is a better hook. It's direct, it tells you what, it immediately connects the audience to the material that they're looking at. It's punchy, and then we paired that with different photos of different livestock. I think this one was a llama, but we cycled through different livestock for that ad so that it really could connect with people. So we're going to take a, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
So the next slide then is looking at, so for these two different ads, the hook on the second one is obviously stronger, but also going deeper is the Facebook audience. So again, for those of you who are less familiar with this, what you're looking at is what you would be seeing on Facebook for audience selection. Facebook allows you to target the audience by location and geography, by demographics like age or gender, and by interests and job career. There's a lot you can specify to target your audience. In this slide, the part on the left is the 10 link click fall, not very good ad. The one on the right is the 62 link click, much better spring ad. And so here one of the things we can see is that the fall ad, we targeted a lot of different ag-related interests and employers. If you look at that, it's a huge list where I didn't really know what the audience was. So I just kind of kept adding different demographics that Facebook could identify, increasing the size of the audience and hoping that would, we would reach some of the right people. Also on location, you'll see that we picked several more rural areas, Enumclaw, Hobart, and Snoqualmie. And then Facebook will just do a radius around where you pick that location. If we look at the ad on the right, I really whittled down the number of interests. So trying to think of this massive list we compiled, which of these are the items that might really speak to somebody who is not just interested in these topics, but actually on a working farmer ranch, able to do something about this. You can also see in the location, Facebook allows you to pick your location by either typing in a city name, a county name, or you can drop pins, which is picking a specific latitude and longitude, and then a radius around those. So the location on the right, the location on the left then, when it says Enumclaw plus 10 miles, that includes everyone that's within the town limits of Enumclaw, many of whom might be interested in these topics. They might work indirectly in these fields, but it's including a lot of effectively urban dwellers who probably can't actually make use of this information. Whereas with the targeting on the right, we dropped pins outside of those areas. So you're really trying to capture just the people living in the rural area. There's so much you can do with Facebook targeting. It looks like a lot, it looks very complicated, but it's important to know that you can just jump in, and like you saw with the ad on the left, I just jumped in and started kind of guessing who the audience for this presentation was. I guessed wrong in a lot of the cases here, but it gave us something to work off of to then this spring really start to dial in who are the right people that we're trying to reach. There are a lot of resources online on Google about audience targeting. Again, a lot of them are broken down into sort of the blog listicle style with the top 10 advertising techniques for Facebook kind of stuff. Those can be really useful. They can really help you understand how to think through what the best way to select your audience is for the ads that you want to run. And so this next slide is, again, what you're going to see as you're trying to run, as you're trying to develop an ad. And what you see here is, this is the geographic targeting that I mentioned just previously. And this is, again, targeting by latitude and longitude. So you can drop a specific pin. This can be really helpful if you're trying to target a really specific community or neighborhood, or in this case, for our Marine Shorelines program, trying to capture people who live within a short distance of a marine shoreline. So you can see that I dropped a series of pins out in the sound and have it so their radius just barely clips the edge of the coastline. And these are the people that we would deliver the ad to, so that we're not getting people who are too far inland and can't make use of the material that the presentation is delivering. As you can see here, it also Facebook will tell you the potential audience size. So we have 49,000 people are the potential audience here. This is another thing that you gain sort of experience on, is that when you buy an ad from Facebook, what you're buying is really a bid on an ad. So those of us in urban centers in particular are actually competing to buy those ads with anyone else purchasing ads to audiences in our area. Ads run in a rural area can actually be even more affordable just because there's less competition in the ad space. You don't want a potential audience that's too big, and you don't want one that's too small. I realize those are really generic. Those aren't specific numbers I'm giving out, but it's kind of a gut check on what the right number is. And again, this is where one of the things you need to be comfortable with if you want to do this kind of targeted advertising is that there's an experimental aspect to it. It is trying something out and then seeing if that worked. So in this instance, we ran these ads with 49,000 potential people. In the future, we would potentially go remove some of the pins and really target like a specific section of coastline just to pare down that audience and, again, make our $50 stretch a little farther that we typically run on an ad. And then next we have A/B testing. And this is something that many of you may not be familiar with, but it's also really important for trying to develop better outreach materials. And so A/B testing it's a way of learning about your audience and what your audience responds to. It's basically the concept of splitting your ad, of splitting up your audience and your messaging into segments to see what messaging gets the most response. So you can either A/B test by sending the same ad to different audiences to see which audience responds more to the ad, or you can send different messages to the same audience to see which message resonates more. So the example on this screen is actually a physical postcard that we sent, again, for our Where the Water Begins webinar. And what we did is we split the audience receiving this into two groups. One, we sent a black and white postcard, one we sent a color postcard. We put different URLs at the bottom of each one to see and then on our website, when people enter the URL, we get a count of which card is more effective. In this case, we did an A/B test to figure out whether it's worth it for us to pay for colored postcards or keep doing black and white, which can cost significantly less money. And this was really interesting because I know I, for one, was pitching for the colored postcards. They're obviously going to do better. It's just, I mean, look at it. It's so much nicer to see that orca in its majesty, to see the kind of green in the background, the blue of the water. And it turns out what we found through this one was that they were about the same. The audience of people on the coast receiving these postcards, each postcard delivered about the same number of people. So this is just really good information that we can now take into future years and say, okay, now we know that if price is an issue, we can really just focus in on the black and white. You know, for social media, it's even easier to do A/B testing just because of how easy it is to set up ads. So we'll do this for social media where you would set up an ad with slightly different language or a slightly different photo and see which one is more compelling and which one converts a higher number of people. Again, A/B testing is the kind of thing that can sound like it's a huge time sink, but it can be really easy and really effective. And if you're doing, you know, events year after year after year, you can really start to learn a lot about who your audience is and what they respond to by doing this. The next thing I wanted to touch on for targeted advertising is repetition. So again, I know that cost is a huge consideration for a lot of people. And so this is kind of a counter to the need to pay for your targeted advertising in Facebook if you have the ability to do a higher level of repetition. So for the last 3 years, KCD has done a native plant spotlight for our annual plant sale, and we've done a lot of them. We will run one a week for 2 to 3 months, roughly. We probably didn't get that many. And one of the things that we've seen is that we've actually built a following into our Facebook who is not necessarily interested in a lot of our other work, but they love the native plant spotlights that we post on Facebook and on Instagram. We also do 2 benefit planting with native plant workshops around our plant sale, and you can see this year that just huge signups and huge attendance for those. And this is where our repetition of doing this same sort of advertising year after year, and then doing a lot of them week after week, we had just built an audience that was really ready for when the pandemic hit, and a lot of people were sitting at home, and I'm sure you've all seen this same effect. People got really excited to be doing this work out in their yards. So obviously some of these numbers are due to that pent up enthusiasm that was caused by the pandemic. But part of the point I would make is that we were ready to benefit from that by having had this. We had our marketing package for the plant sale built out. We had all of these posts ready to go. And so we were really ready. We had the events ready to go. We were really ready to absorb those people by having done this like high level of repetition. Next, I want to talk about timing. So you can run Facebook ads at any time, and you can either run them as ads or you can run them as boosted posts. And a boosted post is if you've made a Facebook post, at any point you'll see the little boost button underneath, and that's just saying that if you post this post and later you want to run it as an ad, you can click boost and do so. And again, boosting an ad is really easy. You click boost, it gives you that basic audience selection tools, and you hit OK, and it just runs. And so what I wanted to talk about this is the sort of timing of it, which is this was for a wildfire preparedness webinar that we ran. And again, we had built out a package so that we already had planned on doing different social media posts throughout the spring to try to catch people's attention about wildfire and about our workshop. And so we had our content all built out, and while that was starting to be run, there were some fires in King County that made headlines. So for the next post that we were going to run, we simply changed our language to refer to those recent bushfires and changed our hook to, are you prepared for this year's wildfire season? Which I would rank this as a really good hook, given that there were recent articles about fires in our area. And so this post actually got a lot of organic reach. There was a lot of interaction with it even before we boosted it. But when I saw that it was doing that well, because we have our audiences set up and we're ready to do Facebook advertising, we boosted it and we're just blown away. We had over 100 people sign up for this event, whereas last year we ran a very similar event and I think had like 20 to 25 signups. So this again goes back to this sort of like planning out your strategy and having these marketing packages ready to go, so that you can also take advantage of sort of impromptu timing issues that come up. And I am at 11:45. All right, I'm going to go a little quickly through these because I want to make sure I have time for question and answers and potentially to demo just how quickly this can go if there's time. The next slide I had was on tagging posts and hashtags. You can hashtag your normal posts on Facebook. You can do that with your ads as well. And then, but this again is a slide to show that along with your paid advertising, some of the things that you can really do that are free and easy that I always want to mention for people is tagging your posts with partner organizations. So there's just no substitution for sharing out your work with relevant groups, tagging them, messaging them, being in contact with other groups that already have their built-in audiences that you want to connect with. So this was another post that if you look down, you can see that we reached almost 6,000 people. There were 371 engagements. We did not boost this ad. This was just a normal post, but we again had been doing our long series of native plant spotlights, and it kind of culminated in this event posting. And so a lot of these groups and individuals were already kind of primed to be thinking about native plants. And now here's an event where you can go sign up and learn more about actually using them in your yard. It also doesn't hurt that we were offering a $20 coupon for the KCD plant sale, which was way too much. In years past, we've offered the same. But again, doing a digital webinar, we actually had a huge attendance, and in future years, I would be much more cautious about how much money to offer for a coupon. But I think we would have done equally well with like a $5 coupon or a 10% off in terms of really getting people to get excited and come to the event. Next, I wanted to talk about event visibility. So it's hard to tell, but this is a screenshot from KCD's, the front page of our website. If you go to the kingcd.org and you scroll down, this is just right front and center is upcoming events. When you're doing any kind of outreach and marketing for your events, people will often not respond immediately. They got the postcard, they set it in their stack of mail somewhere, they saw the ads, they may have even clicked on it, but they weren't sure what their schedule was, so they didn't sign up. Some time goes by and they remember, oh yeah, I think I'd heard about this thing, I wanted to check it out. A lot of times they're not going to look for the postcard, they're not going to look for the Facebook ad, they're just going to go to your website. And so if you want better event attendance, making sure that it is something that is really easy to find for somebody looking. And so again, I highly recommend checking your own website and making sure that the front page has big bold display of what events are coming up. There are some issues with our display currently. You can see that the names get clipped off, which I'm not a fan of and we need to fix. And you can also see in these examples that we may have needed to do some more thinking about the photos we were using for our events, because even though there's some beautiful landscapes here, it does start to look a little empty without more people on the screen. But really, I can't stress enough just making sure that your events are really easy to find on your homepage, because that's where a lot of people are going to eventually get to try to find them. This is a very small one, but it's kind of a clever trick. When you have people, I hope everyone's doing this already for your social media. When people like or engage with one of your posts, you can click on the people who liked and or shared, and it'll bring up a list like this. And you can see here, this is just a small post, but you can see one of the people has already been invited. That invite button is grayed out. One of the people could be invited to like our page, and then one of them is a person who apparently we could follow them. But you can also do this with your ads. So when you pay money for your ad, if it's a successful one and you get 50 likes or shares or interactions, you can click on that list of people, go through and try to invite them to your page. And this has been one of the most effective ways for quickly growing an audience that I've found, is leveraging the fact that you've already decided to pay for an ad and then inviting any of the people that interacted with it. You also, when sharing future ads, one of Facebook's targeting options is to share to people who have interacted with your materials in the past. So this is a very small one, and I'd be happy to go through exactly how this works, but just knowing that you can do this, that if somebody interacts with your page, there's a way to go invite them then to like the page, and it can be a very effective way of growing your audience. The other after workshop that I had wanted to talk about was something that KCD started doing as we moved our workshops online, and I highly recommend for those who aren't. I apologize. It's very dry today, I don't know why. Is uploading your recorded videos. This is another project that can feel like it's going to take a lot of time, and obviously you can do an amazing job with this. I know some of the CDs really have fine-tuned their video recording and sharing. They look beautiful. A lot of these, we just recorded the video, upload it to YouTube. It's unedited. We just make sure there's a title page. And so, you know, you can look at, this is just a screenshot of our most viewed. And you can see that some of these are I guess it doesn't show you can see that some of these are like hour-long uncut videos and still will have 193 additional views. And so this is where thinking through of really making your events have the greatest impact possible. You know, when you're talking about some events that only get 20 people at the event, but if it was a digital webinar and you're able to upload that video, put it on YouTube and share it out, you know, in a lot of instances KCD has seen, we'll get significantly more people watching it online than we're able to come to the event. Some of ours, like in the bottom center, financial help for forest landowners, which I imagine we need to check at this point to make sure it's still up to date and relevant, but we posted it 2 years ago. It's had 147 views in that time. I checked recently and a lot of those watched the majority of the video. And so this is a webinar that we put on once, but because we were able to record it, I would have to check how many people were at the original, but we've clearly dramatically increased the total number of people who are able to interact and learn from it by doing this. And so that was the end of the PowerPoint. I realized that it's about 10 minutes left in this. And so I can demo, but I was actually interested in opening up for questions or comments if people have those. Feel free to enter them in the chat. I'm going to try to kick my camera back on if it works.
So while Mark gets his camera going, just remind folks, if you have questions, please put them in the questions box or feel free to raise your hand. I can unmute you and you can ask your question directly to Mark. Yep, we've got a question that came in for you, Mark. Someone's asking, have you ever done YouTube advertising or Google ads?
Yeah, and so I forgot to include that in here. You can get, I focus on Facebook and Instagram. When you do a Facebook ad, there's simply a checkbox to say also deliver this to Instagram, which is something that I would say for most people, if you can only do a limited amount of social media, Facebook and Instagram, I think, are still the best places to go with large audiences, and if you're running targeted ads, effective advertising. Google Ads, we have not done at KCD, but I'm really interested in trying that next. I don't know how effective Google Ads are for events that are a one-term event, but if you're talking about a program or an events page, something that's going to be around a lot longer, at a previous job that I had, I did run Google Ads, and they can be very effective. So, I know for KCD, our egg drainage program is one that I've thought about. People are, I'm sure, going on Google and searching, if they've got their ditches and they've got questions, they're going on Google and they are searching for something in relation to ditch dredging, cleaning, something. And I feel like that would be a really easy place to be looking for running an ad, there. Again, I don't know about running them for a specific event. That's just not something I've done much. But for people that aren't familiar with Google Ads, this is where, you do your search and the first 3 delivered are paid for. And those, again, can cost pennies to deliver because you only pay when the ad is delivered. So you have to get a Google account. You set up, it's very similar. You set up your audience, you say how much you're willing to pay and in what sort of time period you're willing to pay it. And Google is, if people do the search that you identify keywords, and if people do that search, then you will get charged for the ads delivered. I think it could be really effective for programs. Again, our egg drainage, I've thought about it also for our wildfire preparedness, because those seem like programs that people probably very commonly go onto Google, search for. We're definitely not at the top of the search returns, but if we were, I imagine that could be really effective. I have also not done YouTube ads, and so I just can't comment there. It's just never come up for me, but I'd highly recommend going online and taking a look for some of those alternative options as well.
Great, thank you, Mark. Just a reminder for others, please put your questions in the questions box or raise your hand and I can unmute you.
Thanks, and I have a question, Mark. I'm curious, is there a best day of the week or time of day that you found for Facebook or Instagram ads?
Yeah, and so this, I mentioned this before, but didn't probably lean into it as much as I had intended. Experiment. So this is something that, again, I can't stress enough, is it's frustrating to get started with paying for digital advertising because you are most likely not going to do it. It might not pay out quickly because it really is something that larger organizations that are spending a lot of money on Facebook collect a lot of data, and they can learn lessons a lot faster than we can. Whereas for us, you end up having to run ads to find out if they're successful. And so, Nikki, it's a great question because when you run the ad, how long you run the ad. So if you want to run $50 in ads, you could spend $50 in one day. Or you can stretch that out and do $50 over 10 days, which would be $5 a day. And when you're on Facebook, it will tell you what your daily estimated and total estimated reaches are. And so Facebook will give you some feedback while you're setting up the ad. So if you picked out your audience and you've got your ad ready, you've picked out your audience, and say there's a potential audience of 50,000 people, you can select different amounts of money to spend, or to your question, Nikki, you can say, like, I want to run this Monday through Friday or over the weekend, or I want to run the $50 for 2 days or 5 days. As you change those options, Facebook will give you that estimate of a daily reach and of a total reach. And so you can kind of use that to gauge which ad might be most successful. But in terms of like a general best practice, I honestly do not have one. There's definitely something that, for me, I found it's much more important simply to be looking at roughly 2 weeks out from the, 2 to 3 weeks out from the event, just knowing that you're trying to hone in on that window of how far out do people commit to an event. And that has always seemed much more relevant to me than weekend versus weekday.
Thanks, Mark. Great.
Okay, we had another question come in. I'm curious what the King CD advertising budget is for event outreach, mailed versus print media versus social media on average.
Yeah, and so that changes quite a bit. King CD, we have, you know, our rates and charges, and then some of our events are through grants. A lot of the examples that I've used where we're working with either a grant or an outside partner, we try to make sure that in the grant there is some amount of money for outreach. And so for some of those, it'll be $100 or maybe $200. For postcards, it's changed quite a bit over the years, but sorry, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but since I've been here in terms of social media, we've been spending about $400 to $600 a year. And that has started to go up just as I've seen how successful we can be. But it really, you know, what we've typically done is about $50 per event, and then done, you know, run one ad for 6 or so events, you know, 6 to 8 events each year. For postcards, I know in the past KCD has hit heights of, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars sending out postcards. And one of the things Nikki and I have worked on together is bringing down that postcard budget while increasing the social media budget. So increasing the social media budget by $200, but then saving $2,000 in fewer postcards sent, and that we're still seeing an increase in total event attendance.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions I've got in the questions box at this time. Nikki, do you have any others?
No, that was great. Thanks for sharing, Mark. Yeah, and I just can't emphasize enough how much we've seen our event attendance grow by partnering together and switching from some of our traditional forms of advertising to the targeted advertising through Facebook.
Yeah, and to anyone who is on attending, I know if you're interested in reaching out to me, definitely feel free, and I'm happy to share any other things. Also feel free to talk to Nikki. She's been at KCD longer and has actually been able to see, you know, I have my window of just since I've been here, she's actually been able to see, you know, a sort of broader sense of like how our approach has changed and those effects, but it has been both of us have agreed that we have seen this increase, and I didn't kind of compile numbers or anything for today. And then I was also going to say that I had hoped to save myself time to do a quick demo of Facebook on the back end. Again, I want to acknowledge it can be really intimidating to hop on to Facebook and start to do this. But there are really good tutorials. I am happy to try to connect people with good information or to like talk through one-on-one, just because I know that it can be really overwhelming to jump into.
Mark, one more question came in asking about how many staff do you have dedicated to doing this type of advertising?
So it's just, so what we have is, in terms of running the ads, it's just me, and I just do this. I mean, this doesn't even account, this accounts for a very minimal amount of my time. What we're currently been doing at KCD is Nikki doing education management, whoever sort of owns one of the events as part of their event coordination. So if Nikki is running an event, an online webinar, as part of her event coordination, she would have worked with me to build out you know, this package I'm describing. And again, it doesn't have to be complex. You know, this is typically for us just a few good photos relevant to the event, trying to figure out what our audience is and what our hook is. And then once we have all that together, I just go on and set up these ads. And again, that's why I'm sorry to not get to the demo, because as long as you have the material together, you can set up a Facebook ad in 5 to 10 minutes. Just because we've already we already have audiences that are called coastal audience, rural ag in King County. For the different events that we do year over year, we've already built out like the audience. So when I go to run the ad, I don't even have to think through it as much anymore for a lot of them. And so, I'll typically do probably 10 minutes to set up an ad for one of our events. So I know the way I talked through this, it can sound like a huge time suck. And again, if you're just getting started at it, it probably will be. But as we've integrated it more and more, it takes less and less time. And I would say actually a lot less time than our postcard production used to take.
Hey, this is Liz Clark. I just wanted to tag on to what Mark was saying. He's talking specifically about the ad creation and ad scheduling and things. The question may have been more about how many people are working on the content that gets pushed out for that. There's actually myself and Nikki, and then we have 2 AmeriCorps IPs that have been helping quite a bit. And then Mark does some content creation as well. But, we've got it down to where certain people do certain parts, and then we just work together to get it scheduled, and then Mark takes care of all the ad scheduling. So I think that helps a little bit.
Thanks, Liz. And I will say it is the lunch hour. I want to be respectful of folks' time. However, Mark, would you be willing to stay on a few minutes if you wanted? There's just one more question, and perhaps if you wanted to do a demo of Facebook as noted, and perhaps those, why don't you raise your hand if you're willing, or if you're interested in sticking around for a few minutes and having Mark do that demo. Just make sure it's not, one person looking for that, Mark. There was one question, if folks take a minute to raise their hand if you're interested in that demo. Question from Kayla, is there a way you can save an audience in Facebook so you don't have to recreate them every time?
Yes, and so this is where I had mentioned that there's sort of surface level Facebook advertising, and then there's a back end that is much more robust. When you do things like boost a post, you typically build the audience, and yes, you boost it, you've built the audience, and then the next time you're rebuilding. Facebook has, and this is another, Facebook at this point, to do anything on Facebook, there are typically 3 or 4 different locations and platforms that you can do it through, just because they try to serve so many different things. But there is a marketing center, an ad center, and when you go to the ad center, that's where you can actually look at, there's a tab called audiences, and that's where you can go and just build audiences. And so you can, outside of attaching them to a booster and ad, you can go in and just say, I want to build my marine shoreline landowner audience, and go in, play around with it, set that ad, give it the title, and then later when you go to do a boost or an ad through their more through the channels that you typically do, when it says like pick your audience, it will then list those built out audiences. And so that's again where, at KCD, like over time, we've built out more of those so that we don't have to think about it as much, because we already have a marine shoreline, we already have a forestry audience. And so yeah, you can go build those out ahead of time, save them, and then reuse that same audience. Or again, as you're learning more about the audience, you can then edit those audiences in the future to try to like hone in on improving them.